I'd like to begin this presentation with this fabulous image painted by George Catlin in 1832, and he called it Medicine Man Performing His Mysteries Over a Dying Man. So when we look at this image from the modern world, you have to admit it's a pretty strange image. It's pretty bizarre. So I'm going to begin with just the question, how do we make sense of that image? Who was this man, and what did he think he was doing? Well, if you will go with me on a trip back in time and use your imagination a little bit, you'll have to. I think I can show you that there once was a world where this image did make sense and everybody understood it. So let's begin the journey. We're used to going back 2,000 years just because we're part of the Christian tradition, but we have to go a lot farther than that to begin to talk about shamanism. 4,500 years ago, they were building the pyramids in Egypt. 10,000 years ago, people were beginning to farm, to learn how to farm. That's what they tell us. But we have to go farther than that. Here's this incredible drawing from the wall of the cave, the Chauvet cave in southern France. And the archaeologists tell us they think that's 30,000 years old. We're going to go farther than that. We're going back to the world of the hunters and the gatherers. Now, anthropologists tell us that there were people just like us, physically just like us, living in East Africa at least 200,000 years ago. Now, when we look at hunter-gatherers, it's easy to have kind of a condescending attitude about that lifestyle because we got all this great technology, you know. But if you take the long view, the human race lived as hunter-gatherers most of the 200,000 years we've been around, and actually longer than that. Now, the way we live today, we've been doing this about 500 years. And I ask myself, do we think we're going to be able to sustain this for 200,000 years? Now, most of the people who were hunter-gatherers were nomadic people. And that's where shamanism really came into reality, and it's where it was the most highly developed, was on the great, vast, open plains of Central Asia. But this lifestyle lasted a long time. Here's a photo of a Native American camp sometime in the 19th century. I couldn't find any date or location on that. But it was still around in the time that my great-grandfather was starting his farm in Iowa. And in fact, there are still people living like this. Here's a photo of the Bushmen of the Kalahari in Africa, still living as hunter-gatherers. And I have to say, that is a fine-looking young Bushman fella there. So all of these people that I'm showing you over this huge span of time, they all have one thing in common. And that thing is animism. So what is animism? Well, here's a couple of kind of stiff dictionary kinds of definitions. The word animism comes from the Latin word anima, meaning breath or spirit or life. Now, I don't write or speak Latin, but I'm pretty sure that the Latin version of that verse in Genesis where God breathes the breath of life into Adam, I'm pretty sure that in Latin that word is anima. So animism is the attribution of conscious life to inanimate objects and the phenomenon of nature. Animism perceives all things, animals, plants, rocks, rivers, weather systems, maybe even words, as being animated and alive. So animism is the view that human beings on Earth live in community with persons who are not human beings. These other than human persons may include, like I said before, animals, plants, trees, rocks, etc. Now this term, other than human persons, this was a term that I had never encountered. It was really fresh and new to me. This phrase was coined by anthropologist Irving Hollowell. Irving is the guy on the right in that picture. And he was describing the world of the Ojibwe, in which all these humans, animals, and so forth are relational beings, they're intentional beings, they're conscious beings, and they communicate with us. Now, it should be said that animism is not a set of beliefs or a religion. Now, if you Google the word animism, you will find sites that say animism was the first religion in the world. And from the material I've looked at, that's not quite right. A better way of thinking about it is that animism is just a way of engaging with the world. So here's a couple more fluent statements about animism. When indigenous cultures speak of spirits, what they are really referring to are those modes of intelligence or awareness that do not possess a human form, that is, other than human persons. Animism is the form of life within which shamanism occurs. It makes shamanism both possible and necessary. Shamans work within animist communities to maintain right relationships with the other than human persons on whom the community depends. So use your imagination a little bit. Try to picture yourself in a world where everything is alive. Everything has a spirit. Everything is conscious. The animals, the trees, the plants, all of these things are granted personhood. Even the rocks and the earth itself. In the animist community, you could use a term like the rock people, and it fits. And in this world, the spirit world is seen as the primary reality. The material world is the secondary reality.
We always say everything has a spirit. The grass, the flowers, the water, even the hills, they all have a history. If the mountains can talk, it would be amazing what they would have to say.
Everything has a spirit. not only mankind. Our people gave token to the water each spring when Mother Nature's wake-up call came, which was the thunder, the first thunder that we heard.
We believe that the spirit world was just right here. It's still with us.
I love this image of this world of animism. This small group of people in some type of shelter, and there's the shadows of the animals surrounding them, and also in the background, faintly, are the images of the ancestors. This is the kind of environment in which shamanism emerged. Now, it's important to say this. These people did not worship these spirits. They are not gods. They are personifications of the forces of nature. And I like this image of a way to try to illustrate how I understand this situation. The people who live in the animism world are just totally immersed by spirits. They are supported by the spirits. They are moved by the spirits. And when they move within the spirits, it's a little bit like this wonderful phrase from the 17th chapter of Acts. And in our Bible it says, "In God we live and move and have our being." But in the world of animism, it would be more like, in the spirits of nature, we live and move and have our being. So they are cooperating with these spirits. They are depending on these spirits, but they are not worshiping these spirits. The idea of worship comes along much, much later. And the God of the Bible was never a nature spirit. Worship evolves in the world of kings and empires. So in the Christian and Jewish tradition, by the time we get to King David and King Solomon, we are in the mode of worshiping God. But in the world of animism, that hasn't happened yet. In this world also, one thing that's very different is that animals are regarded as other than human persons. Ancient people did not see themselves as superior to animals. This is a quote from Marceau Eliade. "There is a mystical solidarity between humans and animals. By virtue of this, certain human beings are able to change into animals, or to understand their language, or to share in their prescience and occult powers. Each time a shaman succeeds in sharing the animal mode of being, he or she reestablishes the situation that existed in mythical times, when the divorce between man and the animal world had not yet occurred." And finally, primitive hunters regarded animals as superior to humans, but empowered with supernatural powers. They believed that a man could change into an animal and vice versa, that the souls of the dead could enter animals, and finally, that a mysterious relation could exist between a certain person and a certain animal.
The holy war that the Blackfeet engaged in right from the very beginning of contact with Euro-Americans was over the beaver. I'm told there's over 100 songs that accompany the beaver bundle. And their power songs. They are representative of all of the animals on the earth, including the creepy crawly things, the insects. And a beaver is one of the very few animals who create their own environment, where they build their dams. They become so totally self-sufficient. They draw the animals to the beaver dams. The insects come, the fish come. It was a really revered animal. They warned people, don't trap in our country. A lot of the trappers lost their lives because of it.
It's also interesting to me that in other mythologies, the animals have a prominent place that we don't see in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Here's just a couple of images of the gods of the ancient Norse mythology. There's Odin, he's the wisdom seeker, and he's always pictured with ravens and wolves. And the ravens, they tell me, are some of the smartest creatures in all of nature, and that's an interesting fit. And then Freya is the god on the right, and she's always pictured with two cats. Sometimes those look more like kittens. Sometimes they're lions or cheetahs, and she always has a boar with her. And so there was a way that the animals entered into the realm of divinity in this animistic world. This is kind of a side note, but it's fascinating to me, at least. These indigenous people were interacting with wild animals. But later societies, after animals were domesticated, and certainly in the modern world, we all interact with domesticated animals. And the symbolism here, for me, is striking. So we have the symbolism from the 23rd Psalm, where the sheep have to be led to green pastures, and that is true. Shepherds have to drive their flocks to find fresh grazing. And I am told, I've never seen this myself, but I am told that sheep will not drink out of running water, out of a fast-moving stream. They have to find still waters, and then they will drink. So in our tradition, the animal symbolism is of critters that have to be led around and taken care of, where in the animistic world, it's, for instance, with the Native Americans, it's the buffalo who provide, you don't have to chase a buffalo to find green grass. And in fact, it's the people who follow the buffalo, not the other way around. So the symbolism is just strikingly different. So again, just to the theme that everything has a spirit. The sky, the rain, the wind. If the hunters have a successful hunt, it's a spirit that made it happen. Now the skill of the hunter, very important, but if the spirit is not with you, you will not have a good hunt. If there's plenty of fish in the boat at the end of the day, it was a gift from the spirit of the lake. If there's a really bad storm, it's because a spirit has been offended by something the tribe has done or has not done. And perhaps most importantly at all, if someone is sick, it's because of an evil spirit. And here's a photo, and I couldn't find a date or a location on this photo, but it's a good guess that this fellow in the buffalo robe is a shaman. He's brought his drum, which is being played, and he's doing a ceremony in which he is trying to chase an evil spirit out of that sick boy. So the thing that I want to emphasize the most is that these ancient people believed in these spirits the way we believe in gravity. There were not any non-believers. In our world, we have religious people and atheists and every different kind of spirituality. But in my understanding, it was much different than that in the ancient world. These people believed in these spirits literally as though they were factual. Probably in a way that, at least for me, I could never embrace. Now, there is a tendency to romanticize this world of animism. Joseph Campbell, who's one of my spiritual heroes, I think was guilty of this. The movie Dances with Wolves, when you think about it, it made the Indian characters in the movie look very attractive and heroic. And there's quite a long theme in literature called the noble savage. The idea that these so-called primitive people lived in a sort of a fairy tale world with a natural, primordial peacefulness and beauty. And I think it's important to emphasize that this definitely was not a fairy tale world. Yes, there were good spirits, but there were also evil spirits. And here again, asking you to use your imagination a little bit of what it would be like to live in this world. Things happen as if by magic. You don't have any kind of scientific or logical way to make sense out of things. Things just happen magically. And the spirits are really the only way you have to try to understand or explain things that are going on. So it's a very mysterious world. And in some ways, it would be a frightening world. It would be a dangerous world in this sense. These spirits have to be accounted for in the life of the tribe. And if there are mistakes made or things neglected, bad things can happen. It's dangerous in that sense and very complicated. This was a world filled with superstitions and omens to be taken into account. There was the potential problem of sorcery and curses. Curses could be put on people or things. Spells could be cast. So, again, imagining yourself in this world surrounded by all of these spiritual entities, some of them beneficial, some of them dangerous, some of them evil, and mixed into all this are spells and superstitions and trolls and curses. And how are you as an individual going to navigate this world, and how is your tribe going to manage living in this world? Well, that is where this person and this image comes back in to focus. This is what a shaman does in the world of animism. The shaman communicates with the spirits using non-ordinary states of consciousness, primarily trances and visions and dreams. They were, in my understanding, the first group of people to develop a craft of achieving non-ordinary states of consciousness to communicate with the spirit world. The spirits that surrounded the world of animism, they needed to be appeased at times. They needed to be persuaded. If we're going to have an important hunt, we need to persuade these spirits to assist us. Sometimes if we've made mistakes, the spirits need to be placated. Sometimes if we've had a wonderful, blessed time, the spirits need to be thanked. And the shaman was the person who knew the ceremonies and the rituals to achieve those goals. Very importantly, the shaman was the person who could draw power from the spiritual realm and that enabled him to heal sick persons. The shaman was also able to get information from the spiritual realm to solve problems that the tribe was dealing with. And again, the shaman had to memorize the stories, the songs, the ceremonies, the rituals that had to be performed, and the sacrifices that needed to be made to sustain the life of the tribe. That's why shamans existed. And it's very important to emphasize that all of these functions of the shaman were integrated into the tribe. The visions and the dreams were shared with the whole community. This was not somebody going off in solitude and having a vision and then keeping it to himself or herself. They were shared with the whole group. This is a picture that's a good illustration. A Blackfoot Sundance camp. It was a sacred festival of the Plains people, usually held in response to a vision or the need for a plea or a prayer to the spirits. Again, the whole community involved. So this is what I hope you take from this video, is that shamanism and animism go hand in hand like a lock and key or hand in glove, whatever metaphor you want to use. That's how shamanism emerged, and they were interdependent for hundreds, actually thousands of years. So again, I read this statement because it sums it up perfectly. Animism is the form of life within which shamanism occurs. It makes shamanism both possible and necessary. Shamans work within the animist communities to maintain the right relationships with the other than human persons on whom the community depends. So I started this with the question of how do we make sense of this image? And this is how I make sense of it, is that the man wearing this bear costume, he was recognized by his tribe as a shaman. At some point in his life, he must have experienced an extreme psychological, spiritual crisis, a personal, mystical experience of death and resurrection. And because of that, he became the keeper of the tribe's ceremonies and rituals and traditions. He lived in the world of animism, totally different from our modern world. He saw spiritual reality as primary and the material world as secondary. And he had a special relationship with the bear. Now, in the ancient world, bears were understood as symbols of reincarnation because They die every fall and they come back to life every spring. So in this picture, my understanding is this shaman is drawing on the power of the bear to help a member of his tribe enter safely into the spirit world. So in closing, I would just say that I'm not really an expert in this subject. I'm not a trained scholar. I consider myself just a student of this kind of ancient spirituality. And this video is one attempt to share my current understanding of this vast subject of shamanism. I hope you found it worthwhile.